Hello everyone, it's Keenan. Welcome back to the channel. So today is part 2 of the multi-part series with my conversation with Matt Picardal, a structural engineer and YouTuber. Again, if you want to see the full version of this conversation, you can just go to Matt's channel. But I'll be breaking that conversation down into different parts so you can kind of follow along. And today we're going to talk about how us as construction engineers are working for general contractors, how we work with the structural engineers. I think it's a pretty interesting conversation. We talk about how we can help each other in the industry and sharing some good stories about our experiences in our spaces. So if you're ready for more fun, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe and hit the notification bell below so you can join our growing family here on YouTube. And if you have any stories too that you'd like to share or any more questions, please feel free to comment below and we'll do our best to reply to you. Thank you so much, and now let's get into the video.
I think that's a good segue into because when you're in the middle of the build, that's for us one of the most stressful times, and our not the biggest issue, but a big issue is that a lot of times things will happen in the field, things will come up, and you'll need consultants, all the designers to basically come up with an answer for you, because you as a contractor aren't supposed to make those kinds of design decisions. Is supposed to go to the professionals that specialize in it. But a lot of times we put the designers in the hot seat, and maybe it's not in the best way all the times, but we definitely need everybody working together for the same goal. Sometimes you'll have designers that I guess maybe don't see the urgency that we see in the field sometimes, and that can be a little frustrating when we're trying to progress on the job. So yeah, when everyone's kind of moving together, understanding, and I guess a lot of times respecting each other's work, I think that's what really helps things out. So for you, what kind of things do you wish contractors would do, or people in construction engineering, that or what helps you out the most, I guess I should say, when you deal with the generals?
Yeah, I guess for the contractors, well, you're right. It's maybe like, things that I wish contractors would do, or things like that. Uh, I think the point that you're bringing up, or what it kind of reminds me of, like, yeah, you'll get phone calls, or the engineers will get phone calls from people in the field, the contractors in the field, and sometimes they need answers like now, or more realistically, yesterday. Like, yeah, we need those like as soon as possible. And and I could probably, I guess one thing that I'd like the contractors to know, or maybe just in general, is that in terms of our industry, structural engineering industry, most likely the engineers are working on multiple projects at the same time. There's deadlines for all those. And so that's why I think sometimes it can be tough to get a hold, or try to get in contact. Like maybe you call them and they're on a meeting for another project or something like that. But I think what would be more, to your point, it's we're in the office and we don't see the fire that's out there. It's like you guys are on the front lines, and if it's urgent, and you guys are actually seeing like why it's urgent, like concrete's going to be poured like in a couple minutes or something like that. And yeah, there are times where it's an emergency, and for me personally, I always try to think of it like, what's the best way to solve that problem, with the contractors in mind too, if they have solutions, and if we can get it resolved in the most efficient way, that's good for the whole team. But also knowing like the urgency, like, is it really that urgent, or is it like everything can't be on fire? Sometimes you'll get like, guys, this is urgent, and then it's like, wait, there's like 5 submittals. Which one is the most urgent?
Right. And that's like that. Yeah, it's that is, I don't know if that's considered old school style, or if that's maybe just a personality thing, but yeah, that's for sure. Well, sometimes too, I guess it depends on how long it's been sitting out there, but it is not the best practice to, working in construction, and to basically inundate the consultants with all of your submittals and say, all of this is due tomorrow, right? Because that usually means that you just didn't do your job in planning and doing things or in executing things properly. And to put that onto someone else's plate is not the best thing. But sometimes things happen, and you need quick answers. So
Yeah, so for me, it's I try to get clarification on that. It's like, okay, what really needs to get done, and if it is, then I'll do my part to help the team out, and if we need to get it out, let's get it out, and let's get the project going.
And I think one thing that you said too that's super important is I think a lot. I would assume that you guys appreciate it a lot when we do come up with solutions, that we don't just throw a question out there and just let it hang, in the horizon, because a lot of times they don't really know how things actually get put together, I would say, unless you've had a lot of field experience. So if you have a solution and a fix for some sort of issue that you see in the field that's buildable, that they can just, say yes or no to, then you can get your answer a lot quickly when you're working in the field. So I think that's it also shows that you are trying to help them out. That's why you want to make thorough RFIs, do thorough submittal reviews, so that it helps out the person that's reviewing it, show that, hey, yeah, this person does understand my drawings, right? The person does understand what they're doing, and you can get things a lot quicker. I mean, I think that's just part of it. So
yeah, the communication, it's obviously the more experience you have, or the more years of experience you have, the better positioned you are to come up with construction solutions that might just come up during the field. But I found it just even talking to, just getting on the phone call, man, it's like the communication, right? Like, hey, you guys got this problem out in the field. Here's what we're thinking of doing. Is that even plausible? So before we even start doing all these sketches, and then you guys may say, no, that's not buildable. What if you guys did this? Then we'll do that back and forth. And then, okay, we got a direction that we want to go in. Let's go into that. Mistake I see some young engineers do is, okay, they get an email from the contractor saying like, hey, can you guys do a fix for this? And they just come up with some fancy detail that they think will work. And then they send it out. And then the contractor will be like, this isn't buildable at all. Like, we can't do this.
Right.
And then they have to, there's like that unnecessary back and forth, and so much wasted time between both sides. Just picking up the phone, or just even listening to both sides, because you get, like I said, you guys are on the front lines. You guys know what's out there and what you guys can do as the contractor, like what's buildable.
Right. And even picking up the phone is so key, especially if you need an answer quickly. To send out an electronic file without any prior communication is one of the worst ways to get your answer quickly. And I mean, imagine too, say it's even a complex problem that you're writing this RFI, it's very detailed, but it's 2 pages long. Like, human nature says that the person that receives it is going to be like, oh, I don't have time for this, right? And then if they actually know what the problem is, they know what the solution is, and they just have to kind of process it through, that's the quickest way to get your answer. So yes, very, very, very true. Yeah, pick up, even too, we've done FaceTime calls too. I mean, if you're an Android user, sorry, but I mean, a lot of times that's been really helpful for us to just, a lot of times our consultants are outside of Hawaii, and just to FaceTime them, show them the problem, they can see the situation, the surroundings. I mean, that's been pretty good too. So communication.
Yeah, show me the picture, show me what's out there. It makes everyone's life definitely better. We'll take advantage of all the technology that's out there for us, because with the communication, man, I think that's like the biggest thing.
And that's why too, they, like, engineers have that stigma of being these like little nerds that just are introverted and they're just doing their thing. But if you're not communicating, if you're not a team player, you're not going to do well in either one of these industries, whether you're at a desk working in structural engineering, or if you're in the field. You have to be able to talk to people, you have to be able to work with people. So super
Yeah,
important.
it reminds me of like even to some contractors that I talk to, it's like they're because with like those stereotypes, yeah, it's a stereotype for because some engineers are like that. Even for me, I wasn't born like being comfortable talking on the phone, but I knew it was a necessary skill that I learned and got better at like throughout the years. But yeah, some of them they don't change, and what do you call it? They're, when I talk to some contractors, they're like afraid to contact the structural engineer because they'll like scream at him and
Really?
like, oh, what the hell are you guys doing out there? You gotta
Oh,
do
the
a fix or
contractor.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's like, oh man, I don't want to talk to the engineer.
yeah. Dude, do you have, yeah, share, do you have any horror stories, bad or like I mean, you can make up names or whatever, but do you have anything like where you encountered something that was a little over the top or you thought was, or maybe one that you thought was really, really good?
Yeah, I think yeah, like when I guess some stories that out in the field when I was talking to some contractors is like to them they would complain about structural engineers that would basically like they weren't good to talk to on the phone. Like they were grumpy, they were uh always scream at them and like always like I don't know, berate them. They weren't nice to talk to. And even like when they would so well and that sucks because what that leads to is they're going to try to come up with like a solution or try to fix it or try to hide it from the engineer,
Mm.
which we don't want. But because if you're having the attitude and the contractor doesn't want to communicate with you, well, that's some part on the structural engineers, maybe personality or easiness to work with, because you don't want that from either sides. So I think things like that where like yeah, they were trying to come up with stuff like, oh man, we don't want to get this, how do we make a solution that doesn't need the structural engineer's input? And I was like, oh,
Mm.
that's not the best way to do it, but I can kind of
Yeah.
see why you wouldn't want to get the engineers point on that. But to us, that's very important. Like we want to know what's going out in the field and how it's built, and if everything's being constructed properly.
Right. Yeah, no, that's for sure. Or sometimes too, I know that a lot of contractors want to ask engineers for typical details just so that they can, in the event of crisis, you can try to utilize the typical detail. But a lot of times the situation is not always the same. So it is good to have a very good working relationship with your design or just with everybody. You don't want to have an adversary. It just doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's I think it leads to like, what do you call it? Those times where it was like or if the communication's not there, the the contractors or the builders or the subcontractors on site will do a solution that they think works before consulting the engineer. And then the RFI reads like, hey, we've already done this solution. Is it okay? And it's already built and installed. It's like, no. Almost
Yeah,
before that happens, it's like they poured the concrete and that's what they try to fix. And then as the concrete's poured, it's like, no, that's, you guys shouldn't do it that way.
yeah,
And then, yeah.
The asking for forgiveness over permission.
Yeah. At your own risk. Oh man. Don't blame us if we have to like tear everything out or whatnot. What was that? Going back to the question, like, what do you think, or what would you like structural engineers to know, like, in terms of what you guys go through, or that you wish that the engineers would know?
I think urgency is probably the biggest one. But again, it's a two-way street. And maybe it's just for me, I always try to look at what we're doing first before we cast blame onto others. I don't know if that's typical, but I think that, yeah, just being a team player understanding that there are construction tolerances, there's just things that happen in the field that just happen. Like the most diligent contractor out there will still make mistakes because you have a crew of hundreds of people out there. One big one is like when you have a post tension deck, not every person that's installing, electrician, framer, they don't understand what it means to break a PT cable. They don't know.
Yep.
So they're just going. There was one where this plumber was trying to chip out a hole for his line, and he exposed banded cables. I think there were 8 banded cables that he exposed by chipping, and he just saw the blue and just went right next to it, and it was like, dude, you should have just stopped, right? But that kind of thing just shows that not everybody knows. You can talk about it in meetings, you can talk about it till you're blue in the face, but to control hundreds of people is just it's tough, right? So just having that understanding, sometimes it's like, oh, you broke another one, right? It's like sure, I mean, we could put a news blast out. We could, every local news station, whatever, and tell everybody, but you're not going to be able to get everybody on board. And then, just the urgency factor and knowing, hey, if something's hot, we really need it. We really need an answer. But I completely understand it too. If the contractor consistently puts you in that situation, and maybe that's for the engineer too, right? To say, hey, like, what do you guys like? What do you guys need help with, or what are you guys doing, right? Like,
come on, guys.
Right. Like, then you have to put your foot down, right, and say, and maybe it's a conversation with, because a lot of times you guys are hired by the developer or the owner of the project, right? So just having a conversation with the owner saying, hey, these guys keep putting us under the gun, and they say, we're trying, but it's not fair to you guys. So it's like I said, it's always a two-way street. And
with the with the PT cables, I mean, you're right. It's to the if someone hasn't even seen or known what PT cables are, it's not obvious. They're covered. They don't look like steel. Like if you see a piece of rebar, you're probably like, okay, don't cut that. But if you don't have no idea what the PT tendons are, you don't know that they're under like tens and thousands of pounds under stress, and if you cut it, it could like blow up the slab. There was one picture where it was like a field photo, and there were like, it was on top of a post tension slab, and it had like a big red sign that says, don't cut the PT tendons, or don't drill into this existing slab. And then you can see like that big giant hole that the contractor or the subcontractor like post installed. It was like, no, it says right there, don't drill through this.
There. and sometimes, but then you can see, right, like how these guys are under stress. A lot of these guys are told to do one thing and they do it. And it's very tough to have that whole big picture mentality when you have all these different moving parts on a job. So that's the key.
And then I think it's like the stress. I can see why some would just cut through, I don't know, wood studs, and I don't know, like the trades when they need to get their equipment in there, their mechanical units in there. There's a wood stud in the way. Let's get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way. I need to get from here to there. This is in my way. Spacing? I mean, you have so many of them in the wall. What's one more? Well, that's one thing. I don't know. Have you heard that a lot? It's like, oh, what's one bar? What's one whatever? You have so many of this in here. Like, I don't need this. All this trim. Oh, I guess that's one thing. Going back to construction tolerances. I don't know how much say you guys have on these kinds of things, but just not designing to perfection, essentially, where we would need to execute things properly. A lot of times that actually goes more into the architectural sides of things. But if in your design you see, hey, this architect is trying to flush out all these finished materials with exposed concrete elements, it's like, nah, never gonna happen, right? You can't pour concrete the same way you can frame a wall. But and then just understanding the buildability of things. But it's tough, right? It's like, it took me 6 years of being out there with them every day to kind of get an idea of what you can do, what you can't do, what's easy, what's hard, what solutions you can have. So you guys make job site visits, once in a while, but not nearly the same amount. And I still run into things, right? So it's tough. It's tough to know what you can and can't do. But when everyone's trying together, that's what really makes it happen.
Yeah, it's I think with the industry, it's a lot. There's just so much stuff to learn. That's why we have all these specialties and different trades. We're just relying on everyone to, hopefully we can see like the lessons learned. I like to think of RFIs as lessons learned, and that's where we get a lot of I guess for new engineers, that's where you'll learn a lot of construction lessons on like what you mentioned, even like construction tolerances. It was like, no, you can't specify like dig your foundation like 2 and 6.5 inches. It's like, dude, the shovels don't work that way. Like they got like big rigs, and like that perfection part. I think that's like a common new engineer mistake. And well, even with construction tolerances, like with steel, you can try to erect a steel structure, but even in the steel codes, there's steel tolerances. So if you're trying to put up like a super flush, I don't know, cold form steel wall, you got to expect that there's going to be some tolerances that it's not going to be like that out in the field, and those things are, you just have to be aware of. Like, I think either the architect and the engineers catch it, or the subcontractors will catch it when they're trying to build it. It's like, nope, this isn't gonna work.
Yeah, and that's and that's the more typical way, right? The better you are at being a contractor, the better you are at being an engineer. You can get ahead of it on the front end, but a lot of times you can't catch everything, and then you end up being there in the field like, well, can't do that.
Nope.
Yeah. And that's when you start making the calls to the engineer. Hey, fix this. What am I going to do here? And then that's where the higher stress, I guess, comes into play. But
yeah, it's all part of it.
Yeah.
Alright, well that's the end of part 2 with my conversation with Matt. What did you think about our conversation? Is it what you expected? Were you surprised by any of our stories? Love to hear your comments below. And if you're enjoying these videos, don't forget to hit that like button, and please subscribe and hit the notification bell below so you can join our growing family here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you in part 3 on Wednesday.